second to none. There is no room for a third party or another authority, because what it will do, it will weaken the comparative and competitive advantage which Sugar Syndicate has at a time when sales of sugar depend on value addition to capture the remunerative market. I would appeal to the Minister not to spoil the broth. Even World Bank has praised the unique marketing position of Sugar Syndicate, whose marketing of sales committee comprised of 3 millers and 2 independent planters. It is a transparent syndicate, and its director has got a good reputation among sugar organizations at the international level. I hope this amendment will not be moved. There was a time when Omnicane was exercising undue pressure to sell special sugar to specific buyers in UK, but realized it was being misled. The issue will provoke a backlash within the industry. I appeal to the Minister not to try to make politics on such a sensitive issue. The sale of sugar is sweet with Sugar Syndicate, and we cannot make it bitter. If it's working, don't fix it. It markets our sugar special sugars, and Sugar Syndicate is the bastion of corporate and small planters, but the marketing syndicate, the representative of the sugar cane planting community. I sincerely hope we'll have the support of former ministers, especially Honorable Siratan, and I'm sure he will not remain indifferent or insensitive. His father, by the way, was the first chairman of the Sugar Syndicate as far back as 1979. Mr. Speaker, instead of tampering, also I would advise the instead of tampering, I would advise the Mauritius Cane Industry Authority not to make life difficult and to address issues which are relevant in relation to the ethanol framework, which has to be updated, and the biomass, as was stated by Honorable Mohamed and Osman Mohamed and Patrick Garcia-Vanden. They need to sort out the mess on renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, the World Bank has released a report on reform of the sugarcane industry, and it's nothing that we don't know of. So we have to make sure that the proceeds from the sale of sugar obtained over the years from the sweat and tears of planters and workers of the sugar industry, these proceeds have to consolidate the sector. In fact, we have used the proceeds to widen the economic base, and today we are reaping the benefits of the outcome of this base, which has been enlarged. King Sugar, indeed, it has a multifunctional dimension, best carbon dioxide cleanser, biomass to the IPP is much sought after for a multitude of byproducts, including the famous cane juice rum. It prevents soil erosion and runoff on slopy areas, especially on coastal areas. Mr. Speaker, I hope the Minister will give serious attention to the letter forwarded by the Mauritius Cane Agricultural Federation in relation to the permits that have to be effected to planters. And I'm sure this appeal will not fall on deaf ears, and in relation to molasses, bagasse, and bottlers' fees, the government, the Minister, will lend a sympathetic ear, because this is an outstanding issue, and it has to be resolved. Let me now come to the financial services. And I did ask the Minister of Financial Services to pay heed to what he announced, because he didn't comment in relation to paragraph 136 of the budget speech, which stated that to continue the overhauling of the financial services sector, government will adopt its legislative framework to converge the domestic and global business regime. This is a sector where there is no right seeker, but a sector of brain power, and we have, as opposition and government, to be fully committed to this sector. But people are worried because this has been mooted for some time, the convergence of the domestic and global business regime, but still not clear whether the convergence of both domestic and global business regime will mean the establishment of a unified integrated sector, or whether we will have different regime for each sector, but with convergence on some aspect of regulatory framework. I can understand pressures being borne upon us by OECD for harmonized tax regime for both types of companies. But we have the appeal made by operators that we need still separate regimes. So I'll leave it to Minister to give the thorough explanation to operators, and I'm sure they'll have good interactive session because this matter needs to be resolved. It's a matter of urgency, and I'm sure it will be addressed forcefully and in a meaningful manner. This is a sector which is fragile, but competitors are fierce. Our competition is fierce, and there's no shortage of competitors. Competition is becoming fierce. Rwanda and Gujarat International Financial Tech are two promising centers, and with the end of grandfathering, global business companies can place the investment in other low-tax jurisdictions. Besides, the G7 decision was taken to prevent tax avoidance by multinationals through base erosion profit shifting, and Mauritius will face the consequences of that decision. Usually, the multinational pay minimum tax level on the amount generated on the income in each of the jurisdictions where it operates. It has indeed to reinvent, and we cannot just be content with being a back office. The time is ripe to implement the findings of McKinsey report to add value to wealth and asset management. Mr. Speaker, we have traveled a long way. Since the days we relied only on one export. We have used the proceeds to widen the economic base, and today there's more resilience, but nothing can be taken for granted. I expect government to live up to our expectation. We cannot be a country which thrives on growth simply from consumption. We want positive growth not based on inflation and a tax buoyancy which is the outcome of inflation. Mr. Speaker, we need to reinvent, to re-engineer, to address, to face daunting challenges, but to turn those challenges into opportunities. On the opposition bench, we've made some valuable suggestions. We've been very forceful and persuasive in our arguments to rebut the arguments put forward by our friends on government bench. Mr. Speaker, the country belongs to all of us. But on cross-border issues, I've always made an appeal that we need to come together as one nation. No one owes us a living, and the days of preferences are over. We have to be more imaginative, more bold, and we have to reskill and upskill. Time to set our differences on cross-cutting issues, but we are ready to face them at the in the next election, and we are ready, more than ever ready, and they will be taken aback in relation to the people who are going to be fielded to be candidates at the next election. As an opposition, we will come together. The country is calling upon us to come together as one opposition. And you cannot rest assured we will live up to the expectation of the people, because the people are sick and tired of the regime which is mired in corruption, which is decadent and filthy, and we have to put an end to mafia politics, to money politics, to manipulation and management of information, which certainly will cause this country to take a backseat. We want to be in the vanguard of development, and time has to come together, and opposition will live up to, as I say, to the expectation of people, and we shall deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A lost opportunity, exclaimed the parliamentary leader of the Labour Party. He knows what he's talking about. In a crisis, there are two ways of dealing with it. We'll not go into the detail of Ukraine, COVID. Many of us have talked about it. First of all, there is the Labour Party PMSD way, the one that was adopted, the one that they're on record. What did they do? Stimulus package. Honorable Siratan talked about it. I won't repeat what he said. Stimulus package to boost the economy. And they were themselves saying it. The population will get the crumbs, les miettes. That is job creation, and some money will be distributed. What happened? All that money was squandered. I won't give names, but we all know. The one in the financial services sector, he had a BPO, a business processing office. Aston Martin, Rolex watches distributed to his friends in politics. In the Labour Party, which Honourable Boulel leads now in Parliament. The second one, German Berlin, fight after 6 months. Another one in the East took the money, millions, and then closed down. Fight, we don't know where the money went. The last one, a great friend of the Labour Party, took millions, closed down, and in my constituency, a domain has been constructed with that money. A lost opportunity indeed, Mr. Speaker, because that is the opportunity they wanted to have. Take money in times of crisis, profiter de la crise. That has been the history of the Labour Party in power, and they dare to talk of lost opportunities. And not enough. Honourable Lejonga went down the list to finance these people. They took money from the poor. The tax, the bread, all that Honourable Lejonga mentioned. Taking money from the poor to give to the rich Robert des Bois à l'envers. That is one way of dealing with the crisis. Perhaps it's true. It's Chicago boy politics, which works in a dictatorship. But in a democracy like ours, we have a second way, the one which the Alliance has been proposing since 2015 and which is now being put into practice for the last 7 years now. What do we do? Sound management. And that increases growth rates. Use money advisedly. Boost crucial sectors of the economy in order to get additional revenue and therefore give additional benefits to the people and make the population feel à l'aise. It's true that the international context has been affecting our population, but at least now we see how we do the maximum to alleviate the effects of the international crisis for the benefit of our population. Additional sectors, apart from tourism, financial services, all this very ably managed. We have agriculture. Can I just respond to what Honorable Lubin said on macadamia nuts, and not macadamia, macadamia nuts? Well, of course, in 2017, I think it was Honorable Siratan who announced the start in macadamia nuts. I've looked it up, and it takes at least 10 years before you get one nut. And 2 nuts is also 10 years. So, and that is a thriving sector, Hawaii being the first one. And it is going to happen, we hope, because it is a good, productive sector. Second sector I want to mention is the one mentioned by the Honorable Chief Whip. It is apiculture. Yes, honey is a promising sector. I have been impressed by the quality of honey made in Mauritius. Very expensive, but with increased production, the prices will go down. But a word of warning: fake honey, made on the basis of syrup and chemical substances. We must not allow the reputation of our honey to be threatened by people who are using fake production on our market. And I've noted, and I will read impatiently the food bill which is going to be introduced, but already we have adequate legislation to deal with these matters. Use of artificial intelligence in agriculture as well, which has not been mentioned, which I think is interesting, because internationally, in China especially, artificial intelligence is being used for many things, like calculating water resources, the water needs of the plantations, calculating the growth rate and the récolte, and all this is done now at home or in the office. We'll have to work it in order to increase our production. There is therefore no magic in this. It is just hard work, sound management, good thinking that is giving these results. We are result-oriented, not blah, blah, blah. That is the point which must be made. But at the same time, we have given incentives to industry. The wage support scheme during the COVID lockdown. What was it, if not a way to keep the tourism industry alive at a time that it should have died? Or else it would have been taken over by vultures. We saved that industry. And that is a good point for our country. The MIC has been the subject of harsh criticism by the parliamentary leader of the Labour Party. But we've got to understand, the Bank of Mauritius has reserves. Where do these reserves come from? From the population. It is the population that has accumulated the wealth in the reserves. Isn't it right that at the time that the population is in need, that we should help? And that is what MSC is doing. I'm sure the Minister of Finance will talk more in a more learned way than I can ever do on MIC. But all over the world, except for the US, this is what central banks have been doing. The Bank of England is lending directly to firms and enterprises. The Bank of England, the oldest bank apart from the Swedish central bank, the oldest central bank. What is Banque de France doing? All these European central banks, they have to help their country. Do they sleep with a stash of money and wait for the country to collapse? Now, and I don't know why, out of the blue, I don't know whether it was a passing mistake or what, out of the blue, Honorable Boulel talks ill of the Illovo deal. Get your notes well. Your favorite partner, what will you think of what you have just said of the Illovo deal? The Illovo deal turned land into what it is today. Of course, not with the 100% success rate that we would have expected, but thousands and thousands of young Mauritians are actively engaged in the cyber city, and it was, yes, the MMM and the MSM, which together, Anirudh Jagannath, Paul Béranger, together pooled their resources, their thinking, and yes, they bought land from the sugar industry. What is the problem? Buying land from Omnicane and Medin, if it is for development purposes, I don't know the details. But of course, if Honorable Boulel is saying something which leads people into inquiry, of course an inquiry must be done. But I don't believe that this is so. Mr. Speaker, COVID will end. The war will come to a stop one day. But all this will be behind us. There is one thing that is irreversible. We can slow it down, but we cannot stop it. And some of my colleagues on both sides of the House have referred to it. It is climate change. And that is the problem, and that is not only a national issue, an international issue, a universal approach is being required to fight climate change. We can't do much, but whatever we can do, we have to do. We are past the Climate Change Act. The Department of Climate Change, the Climate Change Committee, are structures which are here to help us fight climate change. But we can't fight climate change through institutions. The whole population, opposition, government, together must fight climate change and try to change our culture and our habits. We have obligations under the Kyoto Protocol as amended in Doha, the Paris Agreement, when we are just being in office. But let us not forget the population and the NGOs. In our law, Section 19 imposes on government departments the duty to undertake public consultations when developing strategies and policies in respect of climate change. But it can't be, the burden cannot be only on government departments. The burden is a shared burden with the public, with NGOs, and we've got to participate together. I hope that the Department of Climate Change is able to instill and convince the NGOs that they need to work together in order to combat climate change. Much more difficult than Ukraine or COVID. Much, much more difficult because it is irreversible. And we are playing with our lives, and no amount of increase in pensions will be able to cure climate change. I now come to a matter that has shocked many people and that has been the subject of preoccupations. I thought that I would spend some time, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, on that shocking revelation for some, but known facts for most of us. That is the torture by police officers of suspects in order either to repress or punish, but more often to extort confessions. Before I come to torture by rogue police officers, let me talk a little bit on state torture, which has been in history. We can go back to the Roman Empire, the Middle Ages, when the King of France wanted to exterminate the Order of the Templars in the 14th century, 1307. He got all these monks and priests to be tortured with the complicity of the Pope at that time, to be tortured into confessing things just to be able to lay hands on their fortune. That is now a historical fact. It was torture within the legal system. The 18th century saw an end to the torture, but then in latest 70 or 100 years, it has resurfaced. We have had the Gestapo, which had amazing techniques of torture. After the war, many of the Vichy police were enrolled in the police in Algeria, and we know how they tortured with not the complicity, under the directives of the Minister of Interior himself, who then became President of the Republic 20 years later. But France, the state of France, participated in the torture of Algerian freedom fighters at that time. And it was part of the legal system. America, the United States, President Bush signed a presidential decree allowing the use of torture on prisoners in Guantanamo. So state torture is very much a preoccupation in spite of all the conventions, the Convention on Torture that has been signed. But in Mauritius also, there has existed state torture. It's good that I recall in the 1970s, when the state of emergency was proclaimed. In March 1972, the MMM members were arrested under emergency rules, placed in Beaubassin, thrown in Beaubassin prison. No provisional charge, I will come back to this later. Under no provisional charge, not sent to court to be able to complain. And then, on the 16th of June 1972, 50 years to the day, today we are 17 June, 50 years almost exactly, taken from Beaubassin prison, because in Beaubassin they were exercising too much freedom in a prison, can you imagine? And sent to special political cells reserved for political detainees. Among the MMM members, there were two, Virassomi, Hervé Masson, and a third one who is present in the House today, Honorable Béranger. The three were the target of what has been termed mental torture. No need to go into the details. I talked about this when, in 2003, the Criminal Code Amendment Bill was discussed in this House. But suffice it to quote what Dr. Iptong wrote in a report at that time when he went to court. It is my opinion that no human being should be required to live under these conditions of almost total sensory deprivation. It is indeed surprising that they have not broken down mentally, having been kept under these conditions for as long as 6 weeks. That was state torture under the Labour Party PMSD government of the 1970s. And it's good that we be reminded of this. Some people may have forgiven, but no one has the right to forget, because that must live in our history books so that we always are reminded there is always the danger. And they talk of democracy. They talk of the threat to democracy, and they complained. Virassomi and Masson went to the Supreme Court, and Béranger was a witness in the case to describe to the judges what mental torture they were suffering. And you know what government defense was? That mental torture was admissible because they had not been bodily tortured. And it was in 2003 that Anirudh Jagannath and Kader Bayat were counsel in the case. It was in 2003 that Anirudh Jagannath and Paul Béranger passed the Criminal Code Amendment Bill in order that mental torture be also prohibited. And I urge my colleagues to go and see and read the Hansard of 2003 and the revelations that are contained in there. Because of time constraints, I'm not going to go into it. Now, today, and since 2003, the penalty is a fine of 150,000 rupees and 10 years imprisonment. I heard the leader of the opposition say, he thought it was 25,000 rupees, but never mind. But of course, it is not the severity of the punishment that counts. It is the certainty of punishment. And what is the problem? The problem is that these rogue police officers have a culture of impunity. They are protected by their hierarchy. I hear that in a police station, the first floor, they were beating up prisoners and torturing them. But what about police officers in the ground floor? When they're hearing what is happening, they didn't denounce? I take it well that it is a minority who are torturing. But what about those who remained silent? They are as culpable. Yes, Honorable Boulel has mentioned those who got the pen drive or the USB. Yes, perhaps. The inquiry will reveal what has happened, who knew what, and who didn't know what. But for the moment, we know we have had confessions of retired police officers and police officers in office who say, of course, we cannot take a suspect and give him a cup of tea and some laddu. No one asks you to give laddu to suspects. You only ask to respect the human rights of people. And there is a problem with this torture business. You torture somebody into confessing a crime. He goes in court, and if he's got some good evidence, he will be found not guilty, he will be acquitted. Do you realize that if he is guilty, you have allowed by your torture a guilty person to escape from punishment? And if he is not guilty and that he is being tortured into a false confession, you have allowed the guilty person to be scot-free and still be roaming about. How many offences we know where this has happened? So this goes to the basic fabric of our society and of law and order. The leader of the opposition has suggested a commission of inquiry. As the Honourable Prime Minister said, first of all, you can't use evidence adduced before a commission of inquiry. It will be a waste of time and of money, because it costs a lot. But never mind the money. But the time which will be wasted, whereas the institutions which are there, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, which is chaired by an ex-judge of the Supreme Court. I hear people talking against the IPCC. Well, we've appointed lawyers and an ex-judge on that commission. They have to do their job, of course. They have to inquire, and it is not a commission of inquiry that is going to do the job. Then I hear Honourable Dutim and Honourable Lobin cry out, abolish the provisional charge. Well, in 1970, that is precisely what Labour Party and PMSD did. Abolish the provisional charge. That gives ample time to the police to torture persons without having to present them before a court. And that is the basic protection of our citizens. The police, when they arrest somebody, they must bring him before a court without undue delay. And when that suspect comes before the court, he can have access to his lawyer, which in 1970 they did not have. In 1972, they were in-line barracks. Even the mother, the wife, could not come. The sister could not come to see them. And the provisional charge is what enables the suspect and his lawyer to make his complaint so. And Honorable Utim cited the Law Reform Commission's report, which says replace the provisional charge by a custody officer, a police officer within the station is going to afford the protection which a magistrate is supposed to give. I am sorry. I am against the abolition. And what provisional charge are we talking about? The provisional charge does not exist in our law of procedure, of criminal procedure. What exists is our Constitution, which says that when a suspect is brought before a court, the court then decides what to do with him, either to send him back to jail or to release him unconditionally or under conditions after hearing the case. That is what the magistrate does. A custody officer, a police sergeant, is going to decide this, my liberty. So many people here in this house have been able to have access to the judiciary after having been unduly arrested because the police will do excesses. But that is not a reason to abolish the provisional charge. I will be always against this bill. The people who have suggested it, they don't have criminal law practice. I have been doing this for 40 years, and I know how it happens every day, in everyday life before our courts. And I repeat it, provisional charge is a mere administrative expediency because the magistrate, when a suspect is brought before him or her, he's got to note down something. It's a court of record. Where is he going to note it down? He opens a file, and what is he going to call the file? Oh, we devised, ages and ages past, a term called the provisional information. But that is only a term. What is essential is that a person's rights should not be affected, as the opposition is claiming, should not be affected by the abolition of the provisional charge. Of course, we can reform. We can give magistrates more extensive powers of inquiry. We can try and see, enhance the powers. I've seen that 14.4 million rupees are allocated to the IPCC. Well, we can see whether they should be revamped, have more equipment, more investigative tools. That is another matter. But don't abolish something just before lawyers in the Law Reform Commissions have said abolish this. The key to the matter is proper training of law enforcement officials, of police officers. Article 10 of the Convention Against Torture enjoins all state parties, including Mauritius, to give adequate training to law enforcement officials and to all those persons who may be in contact with suspects or prisoners. The key is therefore education of our police officers, because these people, they work under stress, they want to deliver results, and they use the shortcut of torture because they want to produce a suspect to their boss. It is there that we need to educate. We need to keep track of the movements of people who are being arrested. We need to insist on proper record keeping And all this requires training. But let me say that I was personally very pleased when the new Commissioner of Police was appointed. Well, first of all, he has never been part of the CID, and that is a plus mark. His hands are not tainted. Secondly, he has experience. He was posted for 2 or 3 years to monitor the training of police officers in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, and all these countries. So he has actual experience. He worked for the International Red Cross. We hope that this new Commissioner of Police will be able to put his experience, his knowledge to good end. And that will go a long way. Therefore, torture must be very high on our agenda. These videos have helped to shock the nation, and it's good, because there was too much of talk saying, well, you've got to beat these people up, but not too much, etc. Yes, they went too far with the taser. It's not going too far, going too near. Torture is unacceptable by whatever means used. And therefore, we hope that this matter has shocked the nation as it should. Let me say a word on what Honorable Bhagwan had to say. First of all, he talks of my constituency number 19. Let me remind him and the people of our constituency, Mrs. Doriau and myself, and of Honorable Navakalingam, who, I must say, although we are in the opposition, we are good partners in the constituency, all 3 of us, because we need to work for the people of the inhabitants of the region and not spend our time fighting each other. It's very good. Honorable Béranger does not take part too much, but he's an MP, he's a good MP. He goes to his constituency, etc. We are not here to fight querelle de clocher among the 4 members of the constituency. This is why I cannot accept the criticism of Honorable Bhagwan. 250 million renovation of plaza. Camp-le-Vieux, 70 million in the gymnasium. The Mediclinic in Stanley. Lani Beato, since 2000, the candidates were promising Liberto. We have delivered Liberto. It was difficult. Honorable Nagalinga makes a meal out of the state of the roads. The roads are being redone. And Honorable Bhagwan also talked about it. 109 million by the municipality of Bobassa-Rosil for resurfacing of roads, excluding what the CWA is going to do. The Treff Sports Complex, I know people of Treff are watching me on their big screen now. Sports Complex, renovated drains, 60 million. Renovation of Quorum Gymnasium. When in 2014 we won the election, Honorable Doriau knows, Honorable Naganingam and Honorable Béranger also know. Rosil was a desolate place. Today we have put life back into Rosil. And let me remind Honorable Bhagwan and Honorable Kirin and Honorable Fukun, who probably is too new in the constituency. Honorable Bhagwan looks after my constituency. Let me look after his now. The Mediclinic in Coromandel. Us. The sport complex in Montroche. Us. The sports complex in Barclay. Us. Chebel, Kosovo. Us. Kosovo Sports Complex. Jardin Balfour. What was Jardin Balfour in 2015? Today, go and see, go near Jardin Balfour every Sunday. See how you don't have a parking space because it is the favorite leisure spot of the inhabitants of Beaubassin and Petite Rivière of number 20. This is what we have done. And Honorable Bhagwan, I'm sorry, I don't like doing that sort of politics, but I have to do it. Because I can't be provoked and let provocation be unpunished. It talks of percentage. It talks of our votes in Rosil, the bastion. We don't need to do that sort of politics. The elections were challenged. I told my lawyers when it was apparent that there were arithmetical mistakes, I told my lawyers, do not raise technical points. Consent to the recount. Those were instructions I gave to my lawyers. And we told that to the court, and there was the recount. The recount was held. After the recount was held, not all, one or two persons in the MMM said, we are going to appeal, we don't agree. But they lost the candidate. So the appeal was overboard. I don't agree, I'm sorry, but I don't agree with insults given to the candidate who was my opponent. It's not true. We know, I know certainly, how she was motivated. But that is another story, not to be put in public. But then, when Honorable Bhagwan talks of percentages, number 7, Mouvement Militant Mauricien, 6.502%. Number 8, 8% difference between Parti Malin and Mouvement Militant Mauricien. Hein? Number 9, an ex-MMM, Honorable Nakchedi, scored 47.234%. The MMM candidate, 7.408%. Number 19, I hear Mr. Bagan talk of our percentages repeating. The leader of the MMM in his bastion polled 51% of the votes in your bastion in 2019, 2014. Don't make me talk of 2014. You just shut up and don't make me talk of 2000.
Order! 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 Honorable Bagabin.
6%. 1% between Honorable Nagalingam and Honorable Doriaou. and myself, I'm sorry, and 2% between Honorable Doriaou and Honorable Nagalim. There is no problem on this. But don't come and look for trouble on percentages. Look at yourself in the mirror first.
Order! 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 Order!
And la cerise sur le gâteau, la grosse cerise sur le gâteau. Number 20, Bastion. 46.251%, less than 0.5% of the votes for Honorable Bagwan. So, you discuss percentages with me? I have my percentages and I can give you more than that. But we have never said that. I have never gone into this. But it's good because you look for it, you're going to get it. Same constituency. After I have said 46.251% for Honorable Bagwan, just draw your own conclusion. Honorable Kirin, 32.609%. How this big difference? 32.609 against 46.251. The answer is so obvious. And we will see the next municipal elections. I hope we get it sooner than later, because we will see when they come and bring Ramgulam in the towns. Then we will see what the answer the citizens will give them. I have done, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Monsieur le Président, avant de commencer, j'aurais aimé confirmer avec vous le temps qui m'est alloué. Est-ce bien une heure de temps? 50 minutes. OK, c'est bon. Merci.
J'ai rien compris. That was the point.
I was confirming with you the time that has been allocated to me. Is it 50 minutes?
No. This is a question the whips will...
No, just in case you interrupt me.
But don't embarrass me.
I'm asking you. You have...
Yeah, but I can't answer.
Okay.
Don't embarrass me.
Okay. So even if I talk for 1 hour, you won't be aware.
You finish your...
That's good.
You finish your speech, Honorable Kolandavelu? So, who is the next speaker?
Oui, Monsieur le Président, avant de commencer mon discours, laissez-moi répondre quand même, enfin, ce n'était pas prévu, mais laissez-moi répondre quand même à deux items que l'orateur précédent a soulevés par rapport au recount du numéro 19. Il nous a donné sa version, mais il a subtilement oublié de mentionner que 73 bulletins étaient manquants. 73 bulletins étaient manquants quand on a fait le recount. Et on a eu un bulletin de la circonscription numéro 1 dans la même boîte de numéro 19. Ça, il a subtilement oublié de faire rappeler à la Chambre et à la population. Si on n'a pas traficoté avec ces boîtes, c'est quoi, Monsieur le Président? Et puis, il a oublié, je suis vraiment étonné pour quelqu'un qui a été révoqué par son Premier ministre. Vous savez ce qu'une révocation? C'est une motion de blâme contre vous, contre votre personne. Et il est là, en train de défendre le gouvernement et ce Premier ministre, et avec toute sa haine contre le MMM, nous n'avons aucune leçon à prendre de quelqu'un qui a été révoqué, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, maintenant, permettez-moi de commencer en rappelant à la population qu'en 2015, ce gouvernement a présenté une vision 2030. Aujourd'hui, ce dernier budget nous rappelle brutalement que le gouvernement n'a aucune vision et qu'il a même échoué lamentablement à mettre en œuvre les bonnes mesures qui auraient façonné le paysage économique à long terme de notre pays. Un diagnostic de la situation économique actuelle indique clairement une économie toujours en difficulté. Pour comprendre où nous en sommes, permettez-moi de remonter dans le temps et de brosser un tableau macroéconomique. La croissance économique a été en moyenne inférieure à 4% au cours des 5 dernières années, avant que la pandémie de Covid ne frappe. Le chômage est resté constamment élevé, autour de 7%. Et malheureusement, ça va repartir de plus belle. Et la dette publique à 97% du PIB en 2021, soit de l'ordre de 456 milliards le public sector gross debt. Sur le front extérieur, le déficit commercial s'est considérablement aggravé pour atteindre un déficit de plus de 125 milliards de roupies en 2021. Cela est principalement dû à la hausse des importations et à la baisse des exportations au fil du temps. Malheureusement, ce budget n'a pas de philosophie et ne s'attaque pas aux problèmes économiques qui prévalent. Au lieu de résoudre nos problèmes économiques et de définir une vision claire pour l'avenir, ce budget a une portée limitée et myope quand il n'énonce aucune vision pour l'avenir. Au lieu de cela, il se concentre presque exclusivement sur l'objectif de maximisation de vote de ce gouvernement. Les problèmes structurels dans le secteur de l'agriculture, de l'industrie manufacturière, du tourisme et d'autres secteurs ont tous été ignorés. Dans la vision 2030, l'industrie manufacturière devait atteindre 25% du PIB, mais aujourd'hui, elle est à peine à 15% du PIB. Pire encore, aucune enveloppe n'est prévue dans ce budget pour relancer un nouveau secteur économique. Je relève que cela est une grosse lacune qui aura des conséquences désastreuses à l'avenir sur le plan économique. Une telle désinvolture dans la gestion des affaires de l'État est répréhensible et condamnable pour dire le moins. Comme quoi, ce gouvernement ne fait que dépendre dans une large mesure de la consommation afin de générer plus d'argent en termes de la taxe à valeur ajoutée, la TVA. Et là encore, les gens sont prudents pour dépenser davantage. De nouveaux secteurs promis pour être le fer de lance de la croissance économique, tels que le centre éducatif, le centre médical, le parc pharmaceutique, l'économie verte et l'économie océanique n'ont jamais émergé. Des mesures spécifiques et claires pour faire face aux problèmes du chômage, de l'inégalité des revenus et du changement climatique sont inexistantes. Les problèmes fondamentaux auxquels est confronté le secteur des PME et qui contribuent à la démocratisation de l'économie mauricienne n'ont pas été abordés. Les mesures simplistes du régime de financement des PME ne font rien pour résoudre les problèmes structurels du secteur. La mise en place d'incubateurs de PME pour un suivi plus étroit des PME combiné à un financement progressif tout en améliorant l'accès au marché aurait été une meilleure mesure pour stimuler ce secteur. Je m'en voudrais de ne pas parler également de la dette publique qui ne cesse d'augmenter. Je tiens à dénoncer cette attitude désinvolte et irresponsable du gouvernement à cet égard, une attitude qui équivaut au dicton « après moi le déluge ». Nos enfants et la génération qui suit auront à payer ces largesses injustifiées du régime. Monsieur le Président, au-delà de n'avoir mis en œuvre des mesures, de n'avoir pas mis en œuvre des mesures bien pensées qui auraient stimulé la croissance économique, ce gouvernement a ouvert la boîte de Pandore en utilisant les fonds de réserve spéciale de la Banque de Maurice. Cette décision met non seulement en péril l'indépendance de la Banque centrale, mais constitue également une preuve limpide de l'incapacité de ce gouvernement à générer des revenus grâce à une croissance plus forte. Dans la même veine, il faut aussi fustiger la MIC, Mauritius Investment Corporation, qui continue à dilapider les fonds de la Banque de Maurice sans aucune transparence et encore moins de responsabilité. Monsieur le Président, les mesures de ce budget pour les différents secteurs de l'économie mauricienne sont fragmentaires et superficielles. Et aucune mesure n'a été introduite pour s'attaquer aux problèmes structurels qui sous-entendent le chômage et l'inégalité économique. Certaines mesures spécifiques auraient été la réintroduction d'un régime d'imposition progressif pour résoudre le problème à long terme de l'inégalité croissante des revenus. Monsieur le Président, ce budget n'a pas réussi une fois de plus à introduire des mesures économiques audacieuses et radicales qui sont décisives pour Maurice alors qu'elle cherche à se libérer du piège des revenus intermédiaires et à passer à un pays à revenus élevés au XXIe siècle. On note également que ce discours du budget fait abstraction des mesures pour la relance de notre économie. Il est malheureux de constater que ce discours pêche par un manque flagrant d'un plan de relance pour inciter à la consommation. Car un pouvoir d'achat qui rétrécit tel un pot de chagrin ne favorise pas la consommation. Il freine même l'envie de consommer. Bref, aucun plan de relance n'est prévu. Or, une politique de relance économique s'avère nécessaire lorsqu'un pays passe dans des circonstances difficiles, comme c'est le cas par le temps qui court. Parallèlement, la dépréciation de la roupie n'arrange guère les choses. Il y a un impact déterminant sur le prix de nos articles de consommation, car les importateurs de ces produits qui sont en demande régulière ne font que répercuter le surplus du coût aux malheureux consommateurs. Je viens maintenant à la cherté de la vie. Faut-il rappeler que les gens souffrent du coût de la vie qui ne cesse de prendre l'ascenseur? Ils sont de plus en plus mal à équilibrer leur budget familial et subvenir comme il se doit aux besoins de leur famille. La cause principale de cette situation qui a tendance à perdurer, c'est évidemment la dépréciation de la roupie, ou plutôt, je dirais même, de la dévaluation de la roupie, quand on le prend en pourcentage, ce qui explique les prix exorbitants des carburants tels que l'essence et le diesel, mais aussi le prix des denrées alimentaires de base dans les supermarchés. Aujourd'hui, les gens n'achètent que l'essentiel pour faire bouillir la marmite. Fini les temps où pour faire plaisir aux enfants, au moins une fois par mois, on pouvait se permettre le luxe de mettre 2 paquets de biscuits ou de fruits dans les caddies. Parlons maintenant des prix des médicaments, les plus nécessaires dans les pharmacies pour la population. Nous avons en tête surtout les personnes âgées et celles qui doivent ménager une santé défaillante, d'autant qu'elles souffrent de la maladie non transmissible, dont le diabète et l'hypertension. Les gens qui doivent prendre des médicaments au quotidien ne cessent de se plaindre des coûts exorbitants de certains médicaments. Ils sont obligés de débourser entre 2 000 à 3 000 roupies par mois uniquement pour leur budget de santé. Par conséquent, eu égard à la cherté de la vie, une augmentation de 1 000 à 2 000 roupies sur le montant de la pension passe pour un leurre. Quand la valeur réelle est bien moins, vu que les prix ont augmenté davantage, peu importe la provenance de leur pays d'origine. Et le discours du budget ne fait pas état d'un contrôle des dépenses dans le secteur public, un aspect décrié maintes fois par les directeurs de l'audit. Par ailleurs, Monsieur le Président, pour causer cette situation, aux allures de morosité ambiante, on fait l'impasse sur la productivité. Ne sait-on pas qu'on peut générer la croissance économique grâce aux gains découlant de la productivité? Mais comment peut-on espérer stimuler la croissance sans encourager une meilleure efficacité des facteurs de production? Dans la même foulée, faut-il rappeler que lorsque l'argent est consommé, il augmente la croissance. Or, les ménages au bas de l'échelle sociale peinent à joindre les deux bouts. Même des produits alimentaires de base sont laissés sur les étagères. Ceux et celles qui font les courses au supermarché doivent constamment revoir leurs priorités. Lorsque l'on ne prévoit pas une gamme de mesures pour redynamiser la productivité, la croissance économique prend du retard. Monsieur le Président, il y a une question que tout le monde se pose et j'espère que le ministre des Finances va nous répondre lors de son summing-up, c'est-à-dire l'argent qu'il va distribuer pour les augmentations, comme il a annoncé dans le budget, proviendrait du fonds du CSG. Contribution sociale généralisée. Mais cet argent était destiné à payer les pensions pour les prochaines années. Mais il puise déjà dans ce fonds. Donc ces fonds prévus pour demain et utilisés aujourd'hui. Donc on est en droit de savoir où est-ce qu'il va tirer de l'argent pour financer ces engagements futurs. Est-ce une hausse de la CSG sera inévitable dans les années à venir? On se pose la question, Monsieur le Président, et j'espère que le ministre des Finances va nous répondre lors de son summing-up. Je note aussi que ce présent discours du budget, tout comme ce fut le cas lors des deux derniers discours du budget, nous offre du réchauffé. Le ministre des Finances aurait-il le secret de renouveler l'emballage tout en présentant le même contenu? Est-il devenu maître dans l'art de la tromperie chez la marchandise? Mais le peuple n'est pas dupe, Monsieur le Président. Je m'explique. Cette année encore, on constate que beaucoup de projets déjà annoncés dans le passé, lors d'un exercice similaire, n'ont pas été réalisés. La liste est longue, mais je ne citerai entre autres quelques-uns seulement, notamment le fameux Rivière des Anguilles Dames, mais aussi, dans ma circonscription, le canal anglais. Je ne sais pas combien de fois j'ai soulevé le problème du canal anglais dans cette chambre pendant des années, à travers des piqueuses, à l'ajournement, et je me souviens, à un certain moment, même le Premier ministre était venu à la chambre pour faire un statement par rapport au canal anglais, et j'étais ravi, parce que j'avais espoir que finalement les travaux allaient être faits. Et il y a des années de cela. Mais finalement, rien n'a été fait, et aujourd'hui, on retrouve ça dans le budget. J'ose espérer que cette fois-ci, ce sera la bonne. Entre autres, de temps en temps, on nous rebat les oreilles en évoquant des projets qui coûteraient des sommes faramineuses, même s'ils n'ont pas été concrétisés. Monsieur le Président, la Covid-19, qui a pesé sur la tête de la population comme une épée de Damoclès, a paradoxalement joué en faveur de ceux qui ont tiré gros profit. Des contrats ont été alloués dans la plus grande opacité. Tous ceux qui se sont approchés du dossier lié au procurement se sont fait brûler les mains. Personne n'osera en parler au risque de disparaître dans la circulation sans laisser des traces. Le rapport de l'audit, comme le rapport du Public Accounts Committee, ont fait l'état. Mais comme toujours, dis-le Bretson. Comme si pour causer la situation financière de notre économie, des scandales d'une ampleur que nous n'avons jamais connue auparavant se suivent. Ils sont même de plus en plus graves. Pendant le premier confinement de 2020, pour contrecarrer la gravité de la situation eu égard à la propagation de la COVID-19, le gouvernement a eu recours à l'achat des médicaments et des équipements. Mais là où le bas blesse, c'est que les prix de ces médicaments ont été majorés par 5 à 6 fois, voire même à 10 fois de leur valeur réelle. Certains commerçants véreux, avec l'aide de certains, ont profité de l'aubaine pour s'enrichir grâce à la complicité des puissants en haut lieu. Ainsi, en ce qui concerne le molnupiravir, Par exemple, le prix est passé de 9 à 79 roupies l'unité. Rien d'étonnant donc que de telles pratiques malveillantes ont été sévèrement blâmées par le directeur de l'audit dans son rapport annuel. Une enquête a été instituée, certes, pour situer les responsabilités, mais jusqu'à maintenant, on ne sait toujours pas si cette enquête progresse ou pas, ou si des conclusions ont été envoyées aux calendes grecques. On attend toujours, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi maintenant de venir à la politique de logement du gouvernement. Le terre et logement dont je suis le porte-parole au MMM, je voudrais aborder la politique de logement du gouvernement. Je considère que cette politique a été une faillite totale pour ce gouvernement. Et je vais m'expliquer. Et je vais donner à la Chambre les chiffres et je vais citer tous les différents budgets annoncés depuis 2015. Je ne vais pas parler à la légère et j'ose espérer avoir des réponses plus tard. On continue à utiliser des subterfuges et des effets d'annonce concernant la construction des unités de logement, surtout pour la classe des défavorisés de notre société. Pourquoi la politique de logement a été une faillite? Je vais démontrer à la Chambre et à la population qui nous regardent comment, année après année, ils ont été bénés par ce gouvernement à travers les différents discours du budget ayant trait aux logements sociaux depuis 2015 à ce jour. Là, maintenant, Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de citer, je vais citer les paragraphes ayant trait au land and housing de différents budgets, qui ont commencé par 2015 à 2016. I quote, "First, we are providing funds to the Ministry of Housing and Lands for the construction of 1,000 low-cost housing units for families whose monthly income is below 10,000. Third, we are providing funds for construction of 700 housing units in the next 2 years for vulnerable families under the National Empowerment Foundation." Ça, c'était 2015-2016. 2016-2017. In the context of the Marshall Plan, we are launching a program of decent shelters for the absolute poor that will comprise the construction of at least 800 housing units over the next 3 years. Il y a différents paragraphes, mais je vais citer les plus importants. 1 billion for the construction and completion of 1,900 units. Là, on passe à une étape supérieure parce qu'on parle de 1 billion. On est dans les milliards maintenant. 1 billion for the construction and completion of 1,900 units up to 50 square meters each and 16 sites across the island. Ça, c'était pour l'année 2016-2017. Et dans cette même année, 700 million for social housing in the context of the Marshall Plan. Tout ça, ce sont les annonces budgétaires. Maintenant, je viens à l'année 2017-2018. I am allocating from the government of India's financial support to the construction of social and low-income housing unit. Je me souviens très bien de ça parce que j'avais posé une question à l'époque. C'était un grand, j'avais dit ça au Parlement, c'était un grand du gouvernement de l'Inde. Ce n'était pas un line of credit, c'était un grand du gouvernement de l'Inde. 1.8 billion from the government of India's financial support. In addition, government is earmarking 5 billion for the next 3 years to the housing sector from the budget. J'aurais dit encore, Monsieur le Président, ça ne me fait pas plaisir, mais les faits sont là. Tout ce qui a été annoncé depuis 2016, 2017, 2018. Maintenant, je viens à 2018-2019. I am pleased to announce that the NHDC will start a vast program of construction in 2018 and 19. Our aim is to build 6,800 new social housing units over the next 2 years. Endeavor and has a project value of 12.7 billion rupees. D'année après année, ça a commencé par 1 milliard, 5 milliards, on est passé à 12,7 milliards d'effets d'annonce, hein, s'il vous plaît, pas de réalisation. I am also providing 1.3 billion for the completion of 3,041 housing units, etc., etc. Maintenant, 2019-2020, enter l'honorable Steve Obigadou, ministre de Terre et Logement. À la paragraphe 250, first, to meet the need of low-income families, 6,000 units will be constructed on 16 sites around the country over the next 3 years, with necessary amenities. These will be in high-rise buildings with a maximum of 6 floors. Not even 2 floors, 6 floors. Ça a été en 2019-2020. Et là, pour la première fois, on entend, first, we are providing 12 billion for the construction of 12,000 social housing units across the whole island. Ça, c'était en 2020. En 2020, par le paragraphe du budget 2020-2021, paragraphe 27. This is why today I have announced an exceptional effort to construct 12,000 residential units over the next 3 years for Mauritian families with monthly income of up to 60,000 rupees. Maintenant, on passe à l'année 2021-2022. Government will invest some 65 billion in priority projects over the next 3 years. Et encore une fois, 12 billion for the construction of 12,000 social housing units. Our commitment to this policy is undiminished, and the project will be completed by 2024. Ça, c'était en 2020-2022. On est arrivé maintenant au budget 2022-2023, Monsieur le Président. We made a commitment. Donc, on progresse toujours dans le commitment, dans le promise, là, hein, dans le rêve, quoi. We made a commitment to provide 12,000 families with a decent home during this mandate. Et tenez-vous bien à la paragraphe 280, Monsieur le Président. Construction will start. Not has started, construction will start, Monsieur le Président. Un projet qui en a été annoncé pendant 3 ans. L'argent budgété. Construction will start. Voilà où on en est par rapport à la politique du logement. C'est pour cela que je pèse bien mes mots. La politique du logement de ce gouvernement et de l'ancien gouvernement est une faillite totale, Monsieur le Président. Et maintenant, le ministre Obigadou est en train de se dédouaner. Bien sûr, je dis que vous êtes en fonction depuis 2019, je crois. Et maintenant, laissez-moi venir au PQ. Encore une fois, dans le Hansard, je vais donner la référence, parce que je ne vais pas parler sans les preuves. PQ B374, datant le 15 mai 2018. PQ que j'ai posé moi-même. Voilà la réponse. Maintenant, j'ai donné toute la liste des promesses. Maintenant, je vais donner les réalisations. En fait, combien de maisons ont été construites. Between January 2015 and March 2018, construction of 1,358 housing units has been completed. Et tenez-vous bien, out of which construction of 746 housing units started prior to January 2015, c'est-à-dire le gouvernement précédent, and were delivered in 2015. Donc 358 en 2015 à 2018, si on retire les 746, ça fait 612 maisons venant de la période 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. 2016, 2017, 2018, 3 ans. Maintenant, le dernier PQ en date, qui a été posé par le whip de l'opposition, l'honorable Armance, PQ B 191, 191, date le 30 juin 2020. For the period 2018-2019, construction of 383 housing units has been completed, out of which 302 a été délivrés. OK, on prend en compte combien a été completed, 383. For the period 2019-2020, 307 housing units has been completed. Donc, si on refait les comptes, 2015 à 2018, il y a eu 612 maisons. Si on prend 2018-2019, 383 maisons. Et si on prend 2019-2020, 307 maisons. Quand on ajoute tout ça, ça fait 1302 maisons, prend de 2015 à 2020. Et aujourd'hui, on est en juin 2022. Le ministre des Finances et le ministre du Terre Logement nous disent qu'ils vont construire 12 000 maisons, Monsieur le Président. Et ils veulent que la population accepte cela. 13 000 maisons. Voilà, Monsieur le Président, tous les chiffres que je puis retracer dans les différents discours du budget de 2015 à ce jour et aussi dans les questions parlementaires qu'on a. Maintenant, si le ministre du Terre Logement a d'autres informations que je n'ai pas, je serai ravi qu'il nous donne tous les chiffres. Mais moi, j'ai cité from Hansard pour les années 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20. Donc, Monsieur le Président, en attendant, elles sont nombreuses ces familles qui attendent toujours leur maison et se plaignent à cet effet sur les ondes des radios privées. Et on ose parler du budget avec le peuple et pour le peuple, Monsieur le Président. Comme quoi, en matière de slogan, on ne saurait faire mieux pour l'heureux le peuple. Maintenant, Monsieur le Président, laissez-moi parler par rapport aux institutions qui ne fonctionnent pas. Parce qu'on n'a pas recruté selon le mérite et la compétence. On récompense des amis du même bord en les nommant à des postes de haute responsabilité. Ils ne sont pas là à la hauteur et les résultats, institution par institution, sont décevants. Le pays en souffre. Le fiasco est du domaine public. Tout le monde en parle. Comment peut-on redresser un pays si on ne met pas la compétence en avant? Et là, laissez-moi vous citer quelques exemples. Et en premier, je prendrai l'exemple de la banque de la State Bank. Vous savez, Monsieur le Président, la State Bank, autrefois, c'était un joyau de la couronne. C'était un parmi de fleurons des actifs du gouvernement. Vous savez ce qui s'est passé depuis 2015? Les profits, année après année, ont considérablement diminué. Là, juste avant de commencer mon discours, je suis rentré sur le site de la State Bank pour regarder les bilans des années financières. Et rapidement, j'ai pu noter sur la ligne Credit Loss Expense on Financial Assets and Memorandum Items, c'est-à-dire les impairments pour les non-performing loans, etc. Pour l'année 2018, au niveau du groupe, tenez-vous bien, pour la State Bank, on a write-off, on a impair, just name it, il y a différents noms qu'on peut appeler ça. Pour l'année 2018, 3 milliards de roupies. Pour l'année 2019, 3,6 milliards de roupies. Pour l'année 2020, 3,8 milliards de roupies. Comme disait l'honorable Colin David, nous savons. Mais oui, c'est ça. Il a bien dit. C'est ça qui a fait ça. Et pour l'année 2021, 2,4 milliards. Si on totalise ça, presque plus de 12 milliards de roupies de credit loss. Pourquoi? Parce qu'on a nommé des copains, des copines, des gens incompétents à la tête de la State Bank. Et comparativement, il y a une autre banque mauricienne, une autre banque commerciale, une banque privée, la MCB, une fierté nationale, Après la COVID, la MCB a posté des records de profit, 8 millions une année. Donc, on compare tout ce qui se passe dans le pays, Monsieur le Président. Et résultat des courses, les actionnaires ne sont pas payés de dividendes parce que la banque ne peut pas. Et le plus gros actionnaire de la State Bank, c'est l'État, c'est nous, notre argent. C'est un manque de revenus de l'État mauricien parce qu'on a placé des gens incompétents. Je vous donne un seul exemple. Un Indien basé à Dubaï. Il emprunte de l'argent. Un Indien, il est basé à Dubaï. Normalement, où est-ce qu'il aurait dû emprunter? Soit en Inde, ou bien à Dubaï, dans le Golfe. Vous savez où est-ce qu'il a emprunté de l'argent, ce monsieur-là? Il a emprunté de l'argent à la notre State Bank. Il a emprunté de milliards à notre State Bank et le lendemain qu'il a eu son fric, il a fait faillite. Le lendemain qu'il a eu son fric, il a fait faillite. Et après qu'il y a eu un effet de bouclier par les membres de l'opposition, par la presse, notamment le journal de l'Express, il y avait un article d'investigation. On a entendu dire qu'il y a une enquête policière. Mais depuis, jamais entendu qui a été, même call pour une enquête, ou arrêté ou condamné. Des millions ont été volatilisés de la State Bank. C'est ça le règne de ce gouvernement-là. C'est ça le règne de ce présent gouvernement-là. Donc, et là, je vais continuer, Monsieur le Président. Je vais vous donner un autre exemple, et ça, je suis sûr que beaucoup d'entre nous n'est pas au courant. Encore une fois. Vous savez ce qui se passe actuellement à Mauritius Telecom? Vous savez ce qui se passe à la Mauritius Telecom? Il y a un ami qui m'a envoyé un tableau relatant la performance de Mauritius Telecom c'est-à-dire depuis 2000, enfin je peux dire à la Chambre depuis 2010 à 2021. And I'm talking about the company, not the group. La compagnie Mauritius Telecom faisait des profits en 2010 de 1,5 milliard. En 2011, 1 milliard 558 millions. En 2012, 2,8 milliards. En 2013, 1,4 milliard et en 2014, 912 milliards. Sorry. En 2013, 1,4 milliard et en 2014, 912 millions. En 2015, 965 millions. En 2016, la compagnie Télécom, autre joyeux de la couronne, là, ça commence à gâter. On a fait seulement 55 millions de profits de compagnie. En 2017, une perte de 98 millions de roupies. En 2018, c'est réparti à 1,3 milliard de bénéfices, mais en 2019, 390 millions de pertes. En 2020, 188 millions de pertes. Et en 2021, 74 millions de roupies de pertes. La Mauritius Telecom, Monsieur le Président. Mauritius Telecom, autrefois, déclarait des dividendes de 700 millions par année. La dernière année, ils ont déclaré que 100 millions de roupies de dividendes parce qu'ils n'ont pas assez de fric pour payer. Et qui est encore une fois l'actionnaire principal? C'est l'État, c'est nous, c'est notre argent. Une des raisons pourquoi le budget est déficitaire, parce que l'investissement que le gouvernement a fait, il n'y a pas de retour d'investissement. Il n'y a pas de retour dans l'investissement du gouvernement. Et n'en parlons pas des Mauritius. N'en parlons pas des Mauritius, Monsieur le Président. Et un Mauritius, je n'ose pas même donner les chiffres de profit and loss. Au contraire, je cite de mémoire, on a injecté 12 milliards de public funds dans EM Mauritius pour ce qui vaut aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Président. Donc voilà la situation financière qu'on a cachée à la population, qu'on a cachée à la Chambre. Et qu'on n'ose pas. Et cette silence assourdissant des membres du gouvernement est un preuve, Monsieur le Président. Donc, ce gouvernement doit laisser les institutions fonctionner avec plus d'autonomie et de donner la pleine mesure de la capacité, répondant ainsi aux attentes de la population. Il doit aussi revoir sa politique de recrutement et de domination. Au lieu des proches et des agents sans aucune compétence, il faut privilégier la méritocratie et à travers une sélection de candidats selon leur qualification et non pas selon un certain calcul. C'est de cette façon que la population fera confiance à un gouvernement. Sans cela et sans une justice sociale tangible, l'unité restera une utopie. Monsieur le Président, pour la stabilité sociale d'un État, deux éléments sont indispensables et inextricablement liés: l'unité nationale et la démocratie parlementaire. Chez les deux, ce gouvernement a lamentablement échoué. Le gouvernement dans son ensemble doit se comporter de façon respectueuse et non pas en attaquant et insultant l'adversaire à bout de champ et qui profite des réunions socioculturelles pour prononcer des discours d'un autre temps. Il faut un peu de retenue sur l'aspect démocratie. Les comportements des élus de la majorité par rapport aux interpellations est un flagrant exemple de violation des règles élémentaires de la démocratie parlementaire. Cela exaspère la population qui attend des réponses nettes et claires sans ambiguïté. Le pays n'a pas les moyens de s'offrir une insurrection quand tout va mal. Un soulèvement pourra paralyser le pays. Nous sommes un petit État insulaire qui dépend massivement du commerce extérieur et de l'arrivée des touristes. Il faut penser à tout cela. Ce qui se passe au Parlement est une réflexion de notre démocratie actuelle. C'est notre devoir, notre droit de questionner le gouvernement. Et c'est le devoir du gouvernement de répondre. On est payé pour ça. Et là, Monsieur le Président, je voudrais exprimer ma solidarité envers les 3 parlementaires femmes du côté de l'opposition qui se sont fait expulser. Si je ne me trompe pas, c'est une première dans les annales parlementaires.
Honorable member,
Yes,
make sure you don't contest my ruling.
of course.
Make sure.
No.
I'm not interested with you.
I was just
interested with the member. You don't have the floor.
expressing my solidarity. Monsieur le Président, c'est un triste record, c'est un moment très sombre pour notre Assemblée. Non seulement c'est un sale coup pour notre démocratie parlementaire, mais un manque de respect envers les dames qui constituent la moitié de la population de notre pays. Monsieur le Président, qui ne se souvient pas de cette voix mystérieuse d'une honorable parlementaire qui avait proféré des mots grossiers, des injures inacceptables dans cette auguste Assemblée. Je crois que vous allez être d'accord avec moi.
Your time is over. Your time is over. And I have... Your time is over. Just wait. Just wait. What is it? Wait.
Yeah, can I address you? It's been agreed that the honourable member will be eligible for 15 minutes for his speech.
Yeah. But the time is now 15 minutes more.
He started at 1857. Now 50 minutes is 1947. That's it.
Okay, please continue.
I started before and I asked you because I know at times you get messed up with the minutes. Yes. Donc, je répète, Monsieur le Président, qui ne se souvient pas de cette voix mystérieuse d'une honorable parlementaire qui avait proféré des mots grossiers, injures, inacceptables dans cette auguste Assemblée.
Now
Je crois...
There has been an incident which happened. We viewed the camera and we couldn't identify who was that person. And the matter was referred to experts and I gave my ruling on that. And you cannot refer to that matter and putting any blame and commenting on that.
I didn't mention any name.
That. The matter has been solved.
Yeah, I was just regretting.
We have evidence from experts.
Yes.
And so this is the end
Mr.
of
Speaker,
the
I
story.
was just regretting that we could not identify who said it. That's it. I was just regretting that we could not identify who said these words. That's it. Donc, Monsieur le Président, c'est vraiment écœurant, c'est vraiment désolant ce qui s'est passé dans notre auguste Assemblée. Donc, je disais que la répression est une mauvaise méthode et qu'éventuellement tourne contre celui qui l'utilise. Il y a pas mal d'exemples dans notre histoire politique. Donner à cette Assemblée, c'est l'aide des noblesses. Ne la ridiculisons pas davantage, il y va de notre prestige, Monsieur le Président. Pour conclure, Monsieur le Président, je m'élève avec force contre ce qu'on pourrait appeler le viol flagrant de la démocratie avec les renvois des élections municipales. Je m'élève avec force. Depuis des ans, Monsieur le gouvernement, il faut que le gouvernement cesse de prendre les Mauriciens pour des imbéciles. Si aujourd'hui, on a des restrictions sur les nombres des gens dans telle ou telle activité, c'est uniquement pour des raisons politiques, Monsieur le Président. C'est uniquement pour des raisons politiques. Ne prenez pas la Covid comme excuse. À travers le monde, les élections sont organisées. Ici, à Maurice, il y a des foires, il y a des bazars, il y a des centres commerciaux, il y a des cinémas, just name it, qui fonctionnent à plein régime. Même les autobus sont bondés de gens. Fair enough, Monsieur le Président. Mais il n'y a que les élections municipales qui ne peuvent pas être organisées parce qu'il y aura une flambée de Covid. Il faut que le gouvernement cesse de nous prendre pour des imbéciles, cesse de prendre la population mauricienne pour des imbéciles, Monsieur le Président. Et là, je vais m'adresser à mes chers collègues du gouvernement. Vous savez, perdre des élections municipales fait partie du jeu démocratique. Il faut l'accepter. Il ne faut pas y avoir peur. You know very well the writing are on the wall. The writing are on the wall, Monsieur le Président. Et je dirais en terminant, c'est que je suis persuadé que l'opposition dans son ensemble fera tomber ce gouvernement. Merci.
For the break, Honorable Gano, after your speech, we will break.
Speaker, and then we'll stop if need be. Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Monsieur le Président, je voudrais d'abord répondre au précédent orateur sur 2 points. Sur la question des élections générales, le cas du recount dans la circonscription de Rosil Stanley, et aussi revenir sur le renvoi des élections municipales pour quelques minutes. Monsieur le Président, j'ai bien entendu l'honorable orateur précédent, l'honorable Mia, qui s'est servi du mot « traficoter ». C'est une accusation grave. Et c'est vrai, il a fait état d'un bulletin qui a été découvert quelque part. Et les bulletins qui étaient aussi qu'on ne pouvait pas en vérité account, il y avait un décalage. Mais tout ceci, Monsieur le Président, en disant tout ceci et en acceptant tout ceci, nous devrions nous rappeler que dans cette circonscription, le 21 janvier, la Cour made an order for a recount upon the motion made by the Electoral Commissioner, and there was no objection from the ESC and the respondent, notre ami Colin Davelou, and the recount was carried out le 1er février 2022, et officiellement, ce que le recount avait dévoilé, that the results were maintained. Donc, en vérité, Monsieur le Président, il n'avait pas eu de traficotage. Aucun traficotage de la part des candidats élus, du candidat élu Colin Develou, parce que c'était lui qui était, c'est son élection qui était en jeu. Et aussi, Monsieur le Président, aucun blâme doit être porté contre la commission électorale. And this, Mr. Speaker, sir, give me an opportunity to reply, to give an answer to this mischievous and devious campaign that has been launched by members of the opposition against the Electoral Commission in the aftermath of these electoral petitions. And we know, Mr. Speaker, sir, what has happened to these electoral petitions. I'm not talking to the electoral petition which is still before court, but we know constituency number 1, because I have the register with me, Grande Rivière Northwest, set aside with cost. Number 9, Flac Bonaccueil, Battu against Modou, set aside with cost. Numéro 13, Bundu against Jagatpal, set aside with cost. Savan and Black River, Jabu against Ganu and others, set aside with cost. Soredu against the Electoral Commissioner, Vakwa Floreal, set aside with cost. Kuapip and Midlands, Duval against Electoral Commissioner and others, set aside with cost. Stanley and Rosil, Siouchern against Colin Davelou, set aside with cost. Adebiro against Colin Davelou, as I just said earlier on, the results were maintained, Mr. Speaker. So, what has happened? And the honourable members of the opposition are talking about democracy, respect for democracy. Many of those allegations were vague, were baseless, with a multitude of unsubstantiated facts which were hinging on pure conjecture and speculation. And in many of these petitions heard or withdrawn, the petitioners didn't have proper evidence to prove the allegation, and yet they dared, in some cases, to ask for recounts. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have a quotation with me from President Joe Biden, and I quote him, "We must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured." The Supreme Court judgments in 2 of the cases which I've just cited, in the cases of constituency number 14, my own constituency, and number 17, when we read the judgment, Mr. Speaker, sir, these judgments have put a death knell on this narrative that has been peddled around concerning claims of fraud that have never been substantiated. Mr. Speaker, sir, what the members of the opposition did in the course of these electoral petitions, they have put themselves on trial and they lamentably failed, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, free and fair, transparent elections are the lifeblood of any democracy. Charges of fraud are extremely serious, but calling an election fraudulent does not make it so, Mr. Speaker, sir. Charges require specific allegations and then proof in a court of law. And in their cases, we had neither the specific allegations nor the proof. There was just speculation, rumors. That's why all these petitions were set aside, Mr. Speaker, sir. But what is more dangerous in what the opposition embarked upon, Mr. Speaker, sir, is with regard to the office of the Electoral Commissioner, and the Electoral Commission. Mr. Speaker, sir, may I need to remind the House and the population and the members of this opposition that this office was established 10 years before independence, in 1958. The Electoral Commissioner is not a political appointment. He has been appointed by the Judicial and Legal Service, presided by the Chief Justice, Mr. Speaker, sir. And therefore, in 12 elections since independence, 5 general elections resulted in the victory of the opposition in favor of the alternance politique. And there was a smooth transition to power, and this has been the flagship of Mauritius, Mr. Speaker, sir. We are praised worldwide for having an independent electoral commission since independence, Mr. Speaker, sir. But the opposition must be wary of the consequences of such a campaign, smearing such an institution, and instilling doubt in the mind of the population, destroying the credibility of this institution. And this will take years to restore, Mr. Speaker, sir. And our Electoral Commission and the Commissioner are widely respected, as we all know, in the region and beyond. Regularly called upon by the United Nations, by the Commonwealth Secretariat, by l'Organisation de la Francophonie, the African Union, the SADC. About 15,000 civil servants are recruited to work for general elections each time they are held in Mauritius, Mr. Speaker, sir. And all are people selected mainly from the judiciary, the office of the AG and the DPP's office. And if we say that there has been traficotage, then we are saying that there has been a general conspiracy involving all these public servants who are honest people, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is why the opposition must stop playing this dirty and sordid game and trying to belittle and bring into disrepute such a respected institution like the Electoral Commission or the Electoral Commissioner. Mr. Speaker, sir, I come now to les élections municipales. The honourable member seems to have forgotten that the municipal elections were postponed between 2000 and 2005. The honourable member seems to have forgotten the reasons provided for by the honourable Prime Minister when the question was asked to him, the reason that motivated the government for postponing the municipal elections. But what I can tell the opposition, have some more patience. They shouldn't worry. The time will come, and then we will be on the battlefield against them in the urban areas, Mr. Speaker, sir. The time will come, and we will face the music. Because as a government, when you look at this budget, Mr. Speaker, the number of projects that has been provided for, that has been appropriated for urban areas, I don't think any budget has done that in the past. But let me now, Mr. Speaker, sir, come to my comments I wish to make on the budget itself after having replied the honourable member with regard to the alleged traficotage that had taken place in the case of constituency number 18. Mr. Speaker, number 19, sorry. Mr. Speaker, sir, je voudrais commencer par dire que de toute ma carrière politique, je n'ai jamais vu un budget mettre une opposition à plat comme de ce cas-ci. C'était un véritable uppercut, Monsieur le Président, qu'a reçu l'opposition. Un vrai coup de poker de la part de notre grand argentier à qui j'exprime mes félicitations les plus vives. Un budget qui a fait mouche, un budget qui a été certainement l'objet d'une réflexion mûre, profonde et soutenue, savamment dosée, brillamment construit et habilement élaboré et exposé. Il a donné une nouvelle impulsion à notre machine économique, et j'y reviendrai, et un ballon d'oxygène à une population en proie à des inquiétudes et à des appréhensions. Il a créé sans aucun doute un feel-good factor et a remis un sourire sur le visage de tous les Mauriciens, sur la majorité de la population, Monsieur le Président. En effet, ce budget, j'avais servi le mot de flash flood le premier jour, ce budget, Monsieur le Président, a été un déluge de mesures sociales, un feu d'artifice de propositions populaires et a mis fin à toutes les spéculations et ces campagnes négatives que faisait l'opposition avant sa présentation pour saper le moral de notre peuple. Aucun budget de notre histoire, Monsieur le Président, n'a consolidé notre État providentiel, notre welfare state comme celui-ci. Et dans sa volonté de venir en aide à la population dans son ensemble, toutes les strates, les couches, toutes les catégories ont été taken on board. Quand vous épluchez ce budget, Monsieur le Président, savez-vous quel est le nombre des catégories de Mauriciens qui a bénéficié d'un soutien et d'un apport additionnel? J'ai essayé de faire le compte, Monsieur le Président, mais j'ai dû finalement me résigner, la liste étant tellement longue. Commençant à la page 7, les vegetable planters, les fruit planters, les flower growers, les tea workers, les beekeepers, les sugarcane planters, les farmers, les breeders, les pig breeders, les fishers, les SME, les industriels, les small contractors, les property developers, les local artists, les young graduates, les incubatees, les apprentis, les taximans, les van operators, les private pre-primary schools, les NGOs, les children with special education needs, les spécialistes providing paramedical services to children, les cancers, les cancéreux, les malades, les children, les women entrepreneurs, les women victims of domestic violence, les housekeepers, les young footballers, les athlètes, les professionnels athlètes, les public officers, les citizens de Rodrigue, les Chagossiens, les disabled, les pensioners, les middle income earners, les bakers, les housewives, les young job seekers, les owners of asbestos houses, les victimes of sale by levy, les familles listed in the social register, les bénéficiaires du social aid, les single mothers, les relatives of deceased persons, les residents of charitable institutions, les cyclone and flood victims, les charitable institutions, les children in residential care institutions, les vulnerable families under the national database, les homeless, les patients des branches quad, les staff members of les ONG, les bedridden, les severely disabled, les personnes with hearing impairment, les disabled persons avec moins de 60% de disability, les elderly, les widows, les old pensioners, les orphans, les Muslim widows, les Mauriciens âgés de 65 ans, les parents, les personnes à revenus moyens, les salariés touchant le salaire minimum, les 160 000 taxpayers, les Mauriciens à revenus moins de 50 000, les registered self-employers, les 350 000 salariés, les self-employed. Et en fin de tableau, Monsieur le Président, j'allais oublier les baby boomers. Qui dit mieux, Monsieur le Président? C'est pourquoi je disais jamais, au plus jamais, un budget n'est allé aussi loin pour consolider notre welfare state. La décontenance sur le visage des membres de l'opposition, leur embarras pendant que le ministre donnait lecture à son discours, à mesure que le clou s'enfonçait, faisait pitié, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, it is therefore obvious que ce budget has given satisfaction beyond expectation to all different strata of our population. It has cut across region, ethnic groups, class division. The only groups who find nothing positive with this budget is the opposition, Mr. Speaker, sir. Marred by value judgment, by bad faith, subjectivity, the opposition, I think, save for one member, failed to appreciate a single measure. The least that could be done, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to recognize in the Honourable Minister of Finance an able minister who has spared no effort to bring solace in the lives of every Mauritian and relieve the nation in very challenging times. Il était comme un acrobate qui marchait sur un câble et au-dessus, c'était le grand néant, Monsieur le Président. Donc, he deserves to be congratulated against a backdrop of daunting circumstances that collectively were apt to lead to a melting pot of social instability. Mr. Speaker, sir, at the risk of repetition, let us recall some of the factors that dominated the global and domestic landscape before the presentation of this budget. Only 2 years ago, we experienced the worst economic contraction of economic history, a drop of 15%. It was important to bring the economy back. on its growth trajectory, which the government did, as pointed out in this budget, backed by official figures and appreciated, Mr. Speaker, sir, by both the IMF and the World Bank. It may be recalled that during the pandemic, the Bretton Woods institutions adopted a flexible approach to a designated list of countries, which allowed them to borrow heavily and run high deficit. However, this list did not include Mauritius, perhaps because we are reputed for our prudential economic management, good governance, administrative responsibility, and political commitment. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, when the population was on its knees, this government, under the able leadership of the Prime Minister, together with Minister Padayachi, came to its rescue, gave financial support, saving jobs of thousands of Mauritians on an unprecedented scale. There is nothing more effective in bestowing dignity and alleviating poverty than a job that firmly anchors the individual in society. At the macro level, the balanced approach of government actions averted looting, burglary, and other undesirable social activities. Can we imagine, without the positive action of the government and the Minister of Finance, what type of social unrest could have taken place in this country? The recent events, unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, which failed to contain public uproar, is a case in point. Mr. Speaker, sir, our government acted to harness an explosive situation without dilly-dallying on the means. The key issue is that it maintains socio-economic and political stability, took drastic measures to protect the nation, closed the frontiers at different points in time out of national responsibility and enlightened leadership. It adopted several measures to enable the country to cruise smoothly. Yet, what criticism were not leveled against government? Faced with an emergency, this government averted a socio-economic explosion, fed its nation, fed its children, saved jobs, and created the conditions for an early recovery, as the Bretton Woods institutions have pointed out. But instead of giving a helping hand, the opposition behaved in a most unpatriotic manner, having recourse to rank demagogy, to different types of devious and reprehensible actions. Government, loyal to its principle, adopted a pragmatic firefighting strategy to protect our nation and our economy. And we averted a historical collision that would have been disastrous to our country, Mr. Speaker, sir. We are now more than 3 months since the start of the Ukraine war. People and countries are being trapped between a rock and a hard place. The rock is the unprecedented cost of living crisis, not seen in more than a generation, with escalating price shocks in the global food, energy, and fertilizer markets due to the war. And the hard place is the extremely fragile context in which the crisis has arrived, namely in a world facing the cascading crises of the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate change. No country or community has been left untouched, Mr. Speaker, by this cost of living crisis due to the severe price shock. There is need to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, sir, as we all know, Russia and Ukraine, the largest exporters of wheat, oil, natural gas. According to the IMF estimates, inflation will reach up to 8.7 in developed countries and 2-digit inflation rate in developing countries. The prevailing inflation rate in developed countries, Mr. Speaker, sir, like the UK and Singapore, varies between 5 to 7%, while in developing countries such as Egypt and Brazil, the inflation rate exceeds 10%. Sir, this conflict between Russia and Ukraine resulted in an unprecedented hike in the price of basic commodities. And the price of European natural gas has risen, fertilizer prices are more than double, maritime transport costs are more than triple, rising interest rates and growing investor uncertainty has eroded both the value of developing countries as well as their capacity to borrow in foreign markets. Mr. Speaker, sir, after the 100 days of the war, the currencies of 142 developing countries have depreciated on average by 2.8% against the US dollar. And, Mr. Speaker, when we look at all the documents that are related to the current crisis, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are horrified, in fact. We are pétrifiés, Monsieur le Président. Global impact of the war in Ukraine, I'm quoting, global impact, and this is a UN global crisis document, global impact of the war in Ukraine. Billions of people face the greatest cost of living crisis in a generation. Another one, Russia's intervention of Ukraine puts the global economy at risk. Another one, economic consequences of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, stagflation ahead. Another one, medium and long-term knock-on effects of the war in Europe on global sectors trends. Will there be resilient sectors? And we cannot be any exception, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have been badly stricken by this pandemic for the last 2 years, and the ongoing Russian-Ukraine conflict has not left us unscathed. The aftermath of this pandemic and the raging war are exogenous factors beyond our control. In spite of subsidies provided by the government on essential commodities such as canned fish, powdered milk, cheese, and edible oil, food prices have continued to rise. The price of fuel has, since the start of this conflict, increased by around 76%, Mr. Speaker, sir. Against this bleak backdrop and the spectre of global economic slowdown, this budget, with its visionary approach and bold economic and social measures, is set to carving the road towards an economic recovery and, more importantly, a turnaround of the current socio-economic situation towards a sustainable and shared prosperity. These measures were designed to inject new vigor and resilience to the economy, however based on social justice and inclusiveness. And Mr. Speaker, sir, when we listen on this side of the House to all these criticisms, frivolous, unfair and unwarranted comments made, expressions coming from the opposition like des miettes or budget billet mille, all these remarks that have been made against the budget, against all these social measures that the Minister has announced, Mr. Speaker, sir, I cannot add my voice to what other members of this side reminded us with regard to the Labour PMSG budget of 2006. In that budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, I remember I was on the other side of the House, I intervened. How many crimes were not committed in the name of economic reforms? Labour laws were revisited. They came up with a new labour legislation doing away with severance allowance at normal rate, eliminating the termination of contract service board, which had offered protection to laid-off workers, abolishing the tripartite mechanism, doing away with subsidies on SC and HSC examination fees on rice and flour. Worse, Mr. Speaker, sir, depriving school children of their bread. And this is what the Honourable Minister said in an unforgiving cynicism at page 30 of his budget speech. I quote, this is what he said, Mr. Speaker, sir. Equally, why do we accept a primary school feeding program known for its wastage and inequity, Mr. Speaker, sir? He calls that wastage and inequity. And that was a budget, I think, as far as I remember, 16 or 17 million rupees only, Mr. Speaker, sir. He abolished this primary school feeding program and called it wastage and inequity. And he goes on to say, now is the time to stop this irrationality and spend taxpayers' money in a way that really achieve our noble objectives. So this was an irrationality and this was a wastage and inequity, Mr. Speaker, sir. Hardly had the pandemic abated than this world of ours, as I just said, Mr. Speaker, sir, was subject to this Russian invasion with the impacts on the tiny economy of Mauritius. The embargo on the oil imports from Russia started. The Russians retaliated and started to pay in rubles to produce soaring oil prices on the world market. And although we do not directly buy these items from these countries, of course the war situation has caused a shortage on the world market, triggering a supply chain rise in prices. And we remember in our country, just after the war started, the government, there was a demand to raise the price of bread but our government took pondered action. Instead of allowing bakeries to close shops and make workers redundant, or allow the price of bread to rise 4 rupees per loaf, government decided to maintain socio-economic stability and prevent further erosion of the purchasing power by granting a substantial subsidy to the satisfaction of all stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, sir, if this is not a clear manifestation of a genuinely caring government with a high sense of responsibility, what is it, Mr. Speaker, sir? And we don't forget also how sea freights underwent a consequential increase combined with the appreciation of the USD. Distant and tiny Mauritius has had to bear the brunt of distance tyranny, Mr. Speaker, sir. When we know our dependence on imports, which account to nearly 80%, we are a trading nation and one of the most open economies in the world. We do not have the might to withstand the oligopolistic pressure of the shipping magnates of linear maritime transportation or the tramp vessels. Small countries like us, we are at the mercy with little bargaining power, or they just don't stop at your port, and this has also seriously affected the cost of merchandise delivery to Mauritius. Does the opposition, Mr. Speaker, realize that this budget has made, in fact, a serious effort to address this situation with clear measures? I am talking of the announcement made by the Minister, Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the new maritime lines which will be serving Mauritius and India and Mauritius and East Africa. Mr. Speaker, sir, to attenuate this impact I'm just referring, our government, the Minister of Finance, what has he done in fact? He has provided an arsenal of subsidies, maintaining the prices of basic necessities, flour, rice, LPG on the consumption side. The budget has also provided various incentives on the production side, as in agriculture for tea production, fruit growing, the minimum guarantee price to planters of onions, inputs such as fertilizers and seeds, through concessionary rate of interest for easing facilities to cooperative, tax holidays, and exemption of registration duty. These measures, Mr. Speaker, make a formidable bundle in the supply chain and trigger a dynamism with a blend of hope, optimism, and trust lurking in the horizon. Confidence is a major factor in economic recovery. Throughout this budget, the emphasis is to regain the atmosphere of confidence and place our country on the road to sustain growth. This government has left no stone unturned to generate this element of trust, because the nation recognizes in this government its commitment and seriousness of purpose. Through its institutions, it creates an infrastructure to enhance food security by creating or upgrading livestock zones in selected regions and a propitious climate to do business. And what this budget also did, Mr. Speaker, sir, it got the macroeconomic fundamentals right. And it is a primary purpose of a serious government to get these fundamentals right, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is the appropriate behavior and conduct of macroeconomic fundamentals that generate the enabling government, the confidence, the entrepreneurial spirit to blossom and grow. Mr. Speaker, sir, this abstract and indirect approach to trigger growth and stability has probably eluded observers. But without this indirect approach to attain stabilization and gradual structural adjustment, no economy can thrive. Mr. Speaker, sir, regarding the real economy, the budget provides an arsenal of measures, incorporative incentives, fiscal concessions, infrastructure support, grants, introduction of suitable legislative framework to stimulate production while addressing inflationary pressure. A significant proportion of inflation is imported, so addressing the issue of rising imports is equally one way to fight inflation, Mr. Speaker, sir. At the same time, the budget addresses the problem of unemployment, and with the measures in place and new measures announced, unemployment is expected to shrink to around 7%. With a measure of providing 15,000 rupees to each new recruit and the confidence meticulously built, there is every reason to expect a major dent in the employment rate. Mr. Speaker, sir, the multiplier effect will do the rest. With inflation in check, unemployment poised to significantly contract, we will be approaching the internal equilibrium, and as idle resources are put to work, it will translate into higher growth. Mr. Speaker, sir, with economic growth back, it is not surprising that we will reach the 2018 level sooner than expected and solidly anchored to full recovery in 2023. This is what the budget explains. This is plain basic mathematics, Mr. Speaker, sir. The debt rose to an alarming level in the ratio analysis during the pandemic, because GDP had contracted by a significant margin of 15%, as we know. The opposition and the press, they had a field day to write alarming and sensationalist article, but the opposition saw in the soaring ratio only the incompetence of government, when in fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, only one variable had changed, the GDP growth. So we can now be more optimistic, Mr. Speaker, sir. There is, as a result, we can hope public debt, which has peaked at 96%, has dropped to 87.4% in June of this year, and it is poised to fall to 77.3%. It represents a fall of 18%, Mr. Speaker, sir. Such a feat, although still far from the target, invites a round of applause. This is a tremendous achievement in terms of setting the economic fundamental right. The trend improves the credibility of Mauritius and sends strong signals to world opinion and economic compilers of information. Mr. Speaker, sir, with the enabling environment created through the budgetary measures and policies, we expect that exports will pick up. COVID-19 has taught us that there is room to stimulate the domestic market. Even the internal tourist market can make an important contribution. At the same time, the domestic production can contribute to reduce imports, even if marginally at the start. This should reduce both the trade and the current account deficits with an increase in saving rates. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, we can look forward to approaching external equilibrium at a faster rate. Our biggest challenge, however, remains reducing further the inflationary spiral. So preliminary data shows discernible signs of a pick up in the exported-oriented manufacturing sector, in the ICT, in the financial services sector, and in tourism. Although we are still producing inside our production possibility frontier curve, the policy measures are intended to shift production capacity to attain the optimum economic potential. Mr. Speaker, sir, in other words, this budget is not only one proposing an array of strong social measures, but this budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, is in fact laying the basis. It constitutes a springboard for accelerating growth and development. And in this context, I would like to commend the Minister for one of his continued measures in terms of openness of our economy. Mr. Speaker, sir, from time to time, we hear rather unfortunate comments made by the press or members of the opposition with regards to the openness strategy of this government. It has become imperative that we further open up our economy and country. Attracting more foreign investors, professionals, and retirees will not only boost economic activities, create jobs, and contribute to the wealth of our country, it is also part of a defined strategy to tackle the demographic by attracting more foreign investors, digital nomads, and retirees to Mauritius. Mr. Speaker, sir, this unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic is a wake-up call for all of us, with the absence of tourists for nearly 2 years, showing us the limits of a strong domestic captive market. This situation compels us to build a solid domestic base and a captive market for our economic operators. Today, there are more than 1,100 foreign investors and more than 550 self-employed individuals under an occupation permit who have invested in our country in several sectors, including ICT, manufacturing, financial services, and real estate, among others. They have brought with them significant amount of FDI, which has had a beneficial impact on GDP as well as employment. FDI not only creates economic opportunities, but also a steady flow for foreign exchange, which helps stabilize the Mauritian rupee. In addition, Mr. Speaker, sir, more than 4,600 professionals are working in high-end and technical posts under an occupation permit in sectors where there is an absence of local expertise. Today, the success of several economies, such as Singapore, Dubai, Ireland, Australia, or even Canada, are based on their opening strategy to foreign talent. Why should Mauritius be any different? In fact, today, we should encourage more of these investors, more of these professionals, and of these self-employed individuals to come to our shores and contribute to economic development through their capital injections, as well as the expertise and technology that they bring in. The fall in FDI to 15.3 billion rupees for 2021 has also been evoked at length by several members. I would like to remind members that this is a more than admirable performance, given that our borders were closed for 9 months in 2021, Mr. Speaker, sir, which made it nearly impossible for foreign investors to prospect the markets and conclude deals. The interest of potential investors to set up operation in Mauritius is still here, and the reopening of borders will result in a major increase in projects and FDI flows in 2022 as delayed projects materialize. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are seeing major multinational companies, such as Corel, who have set up in Mauritius earlier, and more such companies will be present in the near future. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will come to the transport sector, if you will allow me for a few minutes, and I wish to inform the House about certain developments in that sector, Mr. Speaker, sir, and this will give me a chance also to answer a few queries or respond to a few comments that have been made by some members on the other side. Mr. Speaker, sir, a country cannot aspire to new levels of development without investing in its national infrastructure. Likewise, continuous improvement in the transport system is a major prerequisite for enabling economic development. We cannot overemphasize the importance of mobility as an effective lever for growth. To that end, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Metro Express has been instrumental in favoring a modern, reliable, convenient, and safe road of travel. The extension of the light rail alignment to Réduit and Cuepip would no doubt further enhance connectivity throughout several parts of our country and afford our citizens with a comfortable and rapid mode of commute. By the end of this year, both these alignments would be completed. The Metro Express is an avant-garde undertaking, as it has challenged conventional thinking. The benefits accruing from this light rail transit system cannot be overstated, Mr. Speaker, sir, inasmuch as the Metro has had significant positive impacts on both the social and environmental fronts, in addition to having put Mauritius at par with the best in class international jurisdiction. The reduced travel time has undeniably uplifted the quality of life of our citizens, who are now able to reach home earlier to spend quality time with their families and restoring the work-life balance. Mr. Speaker, sir, it carries with it many environmental benefits. With a view to making the operation of the Metro Express more sustainable, the budget seeks to facilitate the setting up of photovoltaic farms in order to allow Metro Express to generate electricity from a clean and renewable source. To this end, the installation of solar farms at Richelieu Depot, Berkeley, and Eben Recreational Park would allow the light rail operator not only to save on its operation costs, but would enable it to meet the demand for electricity. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am pleased to inform the House that the ridership of the Metro Express is steadily picking up in spite of the impacts of the COVID-19 on the transport sector, with a daily ridership reaching up to 25,000 since the opening of the Phoenix Line on 8 May of this year, the Metro Express is poised to become the preferred mode of commute of the Mauritian population, as the 8 million passengers milestone would soon be attained. We need to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, sir, and this is to answer a few members of the other side who have said that the Metro is en faillite, ou bien Metro péroule au rail, péroule aux Antes. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me tell these honourable members that the light rail transit system is not yet fully operational, and it is still in its teething stage. It is to be highlighted that Metro Express is expected to be fully operational by December 2022. The Metro, Mr. Speaker, sir, has almost put in place its full operating structure and is therefore incurring 92% of the cost now, but it will attain its full operating revenue stream only in December of this year. On the other hand, as the light rail alignment has not yet been completed, only 35% of the full operation ridership has been achieved at this stage. Internationally, such projects in the initial stage do incur losses. We should therefore wait for the completion of the project before any assessment of financial performance. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, the fares were initially aligned with the best fares. It is now that the Metro fares have been reviewed, and it is expected that the Metro Express Limited will meet its full operational cost and full operation, and we should not forget that the Metro Express is an economic enabler with significant multiplier effects in terms of opportunities for entrepreneurs. Mr. Speaker, sir, le budget a fait aussi la part belle au développement durable. En sus de favoriser un système de transport soutenable, une panoplie de mesures a été dûment élaborée pour accompagner le secteur du transport dans le processus de décarbonisation. De ce fait, Monsieur le Président, je note avec une satisfaction indicible que provision a été faite pour une assistance financière aux opérateurs d'autobus à travers des facilités de leasing étalées sur 10 ans et à un taux très attractif de 3% par an. Cela va sans aucun doute permettre aux opérateurs de mieux planifier le renouvellement de leur flotte, incluant les infrastructures nécessaires pour la recharge de ces véhicules. À travers cette mesure phare, nous sommes en bonne voie pour l'électrification de notre flotte d'autobus et un écosystème approprié sera mis en place pour mieux encourager les opérateurs d'autobus à adopter les bus électriques. Monsieur le Président, ces mesures interviennent à un moment opportun, quand la cause écologique est plus que jamais d'actualité. Et il faut maintenant passer à l'action, étant donné que nous avons à faire face à une flotte vieillissante dans les années à venir. Il est donc temps d'agir. Le rôle de l'État est certes de faciliter cette transition du diesel à un mode de propulsion plus verte, et il convient aussi aux opérateurs de faire le bon choix en optant pour un véhicule moins polluant et qui, d'après certaines observations, démontre un meilleur coût-bénéfice sur le long terme. C'est dans cette optique, Monsieur le Président, que le budget préconise que les subsides sur le plan de modernisation d'autobus sera applicable seulement pour ceux à moteur électrique. Le but, Monsieur le Président, est de favoriser une approche verte et respectueuse de l'environnement quand nous ne pouvons continuer à soutenir une flotte polluante et dont les émissions représentent un danger réel et ambulant pour la santé de nos concitoyens. C'est pour cette raison, récemment, mon ministère, avec quelques mois de cela, promulgué des amendements aux Road Traffic Regulations afin de permettre l'utilisation d'opacimètres pour mieux sévir contre les véhicules fumigènes. Et là, je dois remercier mon collègue, le ministre Amano, responsable du dossier environnement, pour sa contribution, ainsi que celle de son ministère pour la concrétisation de cette mesure. Monsieur le Président, les mesures énoncées dans le budget sont alignées à la vision de mon ministère de mettre en place, dans le moyen et long terme, un système de transport respectueux de l'environnement avec zéro émission carbone. De plus, cela permettra au pays de faire des économies substantielles sur la facture d'importation de carburant. Monsieur le Président, on se doit s'apprécier les efforts consentis par le gouvernement à travers le IFCM pour permettre aux compagnies désirant procéder au renouvellement de leur flotte par des véhicules électriques de bénéficier de facilités et de crédit bail à un taux vraiment très attractif de 3,5 annuellement. Et comment passer sous silence l'annonce concernant le renouvellement de la flotte de la Corporation nationale de transport qui, au fil des années, n'a cessé d'améliorer ses services et opérer sur les social routes afin d'offrir un moyen de transport convenable et assurer la mobilité de nos voyageurs. Certes, il y a urgence pour améliorer une partie de la flotte et de remplacer les autobus ayant atteint un certain nombre d'années. Monsieur le Président, ce sera chose faite d'ici peu, quand ce budget préconise le remplacement d'environ 200 vieux autobus par des véhicules modernes avec un mode de propulsion électrique. Cette mesure phare constitue une première, quand jamais auparavant nous avons envisagé un renouvellement de cette envergure. Cette technologie a été testée par la CNT et qui s'est procurée d'un autobus électrique à des fins de test dont les résultats ont été probants, et cela nous a permis de nous familiariser avec la technologie automobile électrique. À travers le renouvellement de la flotte par des autobus électriques, c'est un signal fort que nous voulons émettre quand la corporation se doit, en tant que compagnie étatique, de montrer la voie et de montrer l'exemple d'une compagnie de transport respectueuse de l'environnement. Le transport est le second gros pollueur dans notre pays, Monsieur le Président, l'industrie du transport. Nous avons pour ambition d'atteindre un taux d'électrification très élevé d'ici la prochaine décennie. Et je voudrais répondre à l'honorable Asivaden ou autres membres sur les commentaires sur le projet d'acquérir 25 bus électriques dans le budget de l'année dernière. En effet, c'était une annonce, Monsieur le Président. Je dois souligner qu'il y avait une urgence de procéder au renouvellement de la flotte de la coopération. Mais compte tenu de l'échéance du temps qu'il allait prendre pour l'acquisition et pour la réception des autobus, Monsieur le Président, nous avons dû, au cours de cette année financière, procéder à l'acquisition d'environ 20 bus conventionnels. Un exercice de tender a eu lieu, le lowest bidder a été choisi, celui qui avait offert de nous vendre les 20 autobus, mais avant que le contrat lui fût alloué, il n'avait pu soumettre la garantie financière comme exigeaient les bid documents. Donc, l'exercice a dû être renouvelé, Monsieur le Président, ce qui a été fait, et en septembre de cette année, la CNT recevra des 20 bus conventionnels flambants neufs. Ne vous en faites pas, Monsieur Asivaden. Je vous inviterai à l'inauguration. The transition to electric vehicles would definitely allow Mauritius to abide to the commitments taken at the different fora. For example, the Prime Minister will remember at COP26, Mr. Speaker, sir, for easing the adoption of electric vehicles and so on. The negative exercise scheme of 10% is an astute financial instrument to foster a greener vehicle fleet in Mauritius. And I must thank the Honourable Minister of Finance to have been very attentive to the request of the Minister of Transport and the NCT, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Speaker, sir, taxi operators and vans also play a vital role for ensuring the mobility of our citizens, and they have not been left out from this green bandwagon. They would also be eligible to a loan facility of up to 3 million rupees with interest rate as low as 0.5% span over a period of 7 years for the acquisition of electric-run vehicles. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is so much to say on the transport industry, how we are supporting the industry, how we have helped during the COVID period the transport operators, especially those in the hospitality sector, because of the reduction in the number of tourists. So much help was given to all these operators, Mr. Speaker, sir. It will take me so much time. Amidst the difficulties faced by the taxi and contract bus operators in the tourism sector, government generously granted a one-off allowance of 10 million rupees under the COVID-19 Solidarity Fund. Mr. Speaker, sir, bus operators were also eligible to assistance from government for the payment of salaries to the employees under wage assistance scheme. We launched the Taxi Operators Welfare Fund, where the Minister of Finance again generously earmarked nearly 900,000 rupees for the taxi operators in this fund. And today this fund is an appropriate setup for easing the plight of the taxi operators. Mr. Speaker, it has been set up, it is working well, and it has about 2,000 members, and we shall proceed also with the setting up of a contract bus operators welfare fund in the near future. Having said that, I say all this, Mr. Speaker, so to show the magnanimity of this government, the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister towards the transport industry during those testing times. But I would like to announce something also, which make an announcement which I'm sure will please the workers of the transport industry, Mr. Speaker, sir. Je voudrais ici mentionner que les employés de l'industrie du transport bénéficient déjà d'une indemnité mensuelle ad hoc de 1 000 roupies initialement payés par le gouvernement sous le Bus Company Recovery Account. Et c'est ceci depuis décembre 2019. Cette mesure qui avait été mise en place en faveur des travailleurs de la CNT d'abord en janvier 2020 a par la suite été étendue à tous les travailleurs du transport régis par le NRB en septembre 2020. Monsieur le Président, les représentants syndicaux des travailleurs du transport ont fait une demande à ce que cette indemnité soit incluse dans le salaire de base des employés. Ainsi, suite à la récente révision des tarifs d'autobus, le gouvernement, soucieux du bien-être des employés, a décidé que cette allocation de 1 000 roupies sera incluse dans le salaire de base et devra être payée par les opérateurs d'autobus quand ils ont généré des recettes additionnelles. Ainsi, avec l'inclusion de l'allocation de 1 000 roupies dans leur salaire de base, les employés du transport auront désormais droit à un salaire de base plus élevé par le calcul de leurs primes supplémentaires, etc. Monsieur le Président. Évidemment, ces travailleurs bénéficieront également de l'allocation de revenus mensuels d'un montant de 1 000 roupies comme annoncé dans le budget, à condition que leur revenu brut soit inférieur à 50 000 roupies. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have also, concerning road safety, several measures have been taken with a view to enhancing road safety. I don't think I will have time to go through all these measures, Mr. Speaker, sir. Speeding, reducing devices, roadside hazard management, belly shop beacon lights on all zebra crossing, speed limit reduced in respect of various roads in our towns and villages, road safety audits, Mr. Speaker, sir, pelican crossings, arrestor bed at Sorez and Valton. An arrestor bed is on the side road of a road normally, and it is constructed to slow down and bring to stop heavy vehicles that have encountered braking failures when descending a sharp slope. And a mid-term review is being conducted to assess the effectiveness of all these measures. With regard to fluidity and mobility also, Mr. Speaker, sir, several measures have been taken, and I wouldn't have time to go through all these measures. But I would like just to say one word on the modernization of the transport sector, Mr. Speaker, sir. We are coming up with a fleet management system which would allow real-time monitoring of buses by the NLTA to ensure that the buses adhere to the approved timetable. This would allow live tracking of bus locations, and the mapping of same would enable passengers to know the expected arrival time of their buses, and they would, as a result, be in a better position to plan their journey ahead. The fleet management system would act as an effective mechanism to ensure that any non-compliance to agreed standards, such as excessive idle time or over-speeding, are flagged so that the NLTA may initiate relevant action. Mr. Speaker, sir, budgetary allocation has been made also for the cashless ticketing system. Similarly, consideration is being given to make optimum use of online tools to ease the registration of new or second-hand imported vehicles by motor vehicle dealers, and for the issue of the certificate de gage electronically. This is to streamline process and reduce lead time for administrative tasks. Mr. Speaker, sir, my ministry is also promoting inclusive development in the transport sector. C'est justement pour cette raison que nous voulons désenclaver certaines régions et améliorer les infrastructures routières dans l'optique de faciliter l'accès et assurer une meilleure connectivité. Nous allons par exemple développer un plan stratégique en partenariat avec le secteur privé pour permettre à certaines localités comme Rochebrune, Montroche ou Camp-le-Vieux d'être mieux connectées à la station ferroviaire de Barclay. Cela améliorera non seulement l'accès, mais permettra à la région de Barclay de devenir un centre névralgique, un maillon important dans le contexte d'un système de transport intermodal basé sur le système de hub. Nous projetons aussi de venir de l'avant avec un concept de développement intégré et innovateur dans cette région à travers un terminal périphérique moderne alliant espace commercial et récréatif articulé autour d'un système de transport efficace à travers le métro express. Ce même concept sera étendu dans d'autres régions périphériques sur l'alignement du métro, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are in fact reshaping our transport sector. In other words, and my ministry is also aspiring to provide the appropriate legal framework to allow online booking of taxis, Mr. Speaker, sir. But this would need, of course, a lot of regulation, and the framework will increase the convenience and improve the experience of availing taxi services. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have also put on our roads microbuses, and new categories of buses are being introduced, and this mode of transport has been very popular. And we are also introducing the shuttle service through microbuses to provide first and last mile connectivity to and from the light rail stations. And this new innovative service will be the linchpin for intermodal integration by enhancing accessibility to metro stations and for an advanced transport station. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are finally devising a transport master plan geared towards the reorganization of the transport sector so that we may have a scientific and balanced approach to the deployment of buses and for rationalizing transport services without compromising on quality services to the commuters, as the ultimate aim is to induce a higher uptake in the public transportation. Mr. Speaker, sir, we ambition for the Mauritian transport system to be hailed as one of the best in the region in terms of reliability, sustainability, and in terms of comfort. If you will allow me a few words on my other portfolio, foreign affairs, Mr. Speaker, sir, I need not emphasize that this ministry and its associated portfolios of regional integration and international trade have a crucial role to play in this regard. As the first point of contact for our bilateral, regional, and multilateral partners, this ministry is ideally placed to ensure that our partnership give tangible meaning to our national objectives through our foreign policy engagement. Mr. Speaker, in terms of economic diplomacy, my ministry has been pursuing sustained efforts to open up new market access opportunities. 4 major trade agreements entered into force last year: the African Continental Free Trade Area, the Mauritius-China FTA, the UK ESA EPA, and the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, the SECPA with India, have opened up preferential trade opportunities for local operators on a market of over 5.4 billion people, representing nearly 70% of the world population, Mr. Speaker, sir. The entry in force of the SECPA with India in April 2021 has provided the business community in Mauritius with access to a market of 1.3 billion consumers for key products. In 2020, our total export to India was 1.26 billion rupees. Export to India as of January this year, Mr. Speaker, sir, stood at 2 billion rupees, an increase of 58.3% compared to 2020. With regard to China, we exported 1.4 billion worth of products in 2021, and in 2020 it was at least 561 million. So from 561 million in 2020, with regard to China, we moved up to 1.4 billion worth of products, an increase of 148%, Mr. Speaker, sir. And regarding the African continent, negotiations on trade in services are being intensified to enable a successful completion by June 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, Kenya, SADC, COMESA, all with regard to all these 2 institutions and this country, we are also being able, Mr. Speaker, sir, following intense lobbying made by the ministry and other COMESA members. In Kenya, we have liberalized the market for imports of white refined sugar. And in addition, SADC and COMESA discussions are going further to consolidate market access for trade in goods and trade in services. We are also promoting our Look East strategy. My ministry is reinforcing our close and historic ties with traditional countries such as India and China, but we are also exploring avenues of cooperation with other countries such as South Korea and Indonesia. We are availing the opportunities offered by the 50-year celebration of diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China and the 75th anniversary with India, Mr. Speaker, so to further develop collaboration in various promising and innovative sectors. Mr. Speaker, sir, We continue to remain engaged in the strengthening of our relations with the Middle East countries, including Saudi Arabia, UAE, so that they emerge as enduring economic partners of Mauritius in the fields of finance. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are sparing no effort to act on our priorities. We are now aiming at a determined intensification of our engagements with all these blocs with clear goals and objectives. Mr. Speaker, my ministry will continue to contribute to advocacy on ensuring also that our Africa strategy delivers. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, I will just say, Mr. Speaker, that this budget has been un budget de promesses et d'avenir. In fact, when après deux années difficiles, Monsieur le Président, je vais terminer dans une seconde, engendrées par la conjoncture économique, l'heure est à la relance économique tout en plaçant l'intérêt de notre population au centre de nos préoccupations. Ce budget se veut inclusif et personne n'a été laissé de côté. Présenté par mon collègue, le ministre des Finances, il comporte tous les éléments pour donner une nouvelle impulsion à notre économie, accorder un essor à plusieurs secteurs pour qu'on puisse créer la valeur autour d'une ligne directrice bien articulée. C'est un budget socialement inclusif avec le peuple pour le peuple. La preuve, Monsieur le Président, est que la population dans son ensemble a bien accueilli les diverses mesures préconisées et qui vont grandement contribuer à améliorer leur quotidien. Quant au pôle économique, le budget a fait la part belle aux petites et moyennes entreprises qui sont, il faut l'avouer, un maillon essentiel dans notre économie. Il va sans dire que la reprise et l'envol économique sera assurée par la concrétisation des mesures énoncées par mon collègue contribuera grandement à la création d'emplois, surtout pour nos jeunes. Ce budget a non seulement réussi à fédérer la population autour d'un projet commun, mais a aussi réussi à faire taire certains oiseaux de mauvais augure qui ne cessaient de noircir le tableau et dépeindre une situation chaotique. Au fait, l'intervention salutaire du gouvernement a été d'une importance capitale pour diverses couches sociales, comme je l'ai démontré dans mon discours, et pour contrer les pressions inflationnistes. Il ne fait aucun doute que notre pays, sous la direction éclairée de notre Premier ministre, est sur la bonne voie. Et à travers ce budget de relance économique, contenant un bon dosage de mesures sociales et sans faire de surenchère, saura remettre les secteurs affectés par la pandémie sur les rails. En ces moments difficiles et dans la conjoncture mondiale actuelle, on ne pouvait faire mieux et personne n'aurait pu faire mieux, Monsieur le Président. Comme j'avais dit, pour terminer mon discours lors de la motion de censure, de ce côté de cette Chambre, Monsieur le Président, nous sommes optimistes, nous sommes sereins à confronter l'avenir, que ce soit les élections municipales ou les élections générales, parce que nous savons, le peuple saura nous juger, saura juger notre bonne foi et nos bonnes intentions. Et c'est pourquoi j'avais dit, et je le redis, à tous nos amis qui nous écoutent, l'avenir nous appartient. Ensemble, nous le ferons. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Members, I'm suspending the sitting for 1 hour.